Hi, this is Kat, and you're watching Triple Threat Sports.
Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Triple Threat Sports. Today is January 8th, 2014. Today is Hall of Fame Day. Today is a day when some players were voted into the Baseball Hall of Fame by the Baseball Writers Association of America. And before we get to that, I'm going to give my ballot to people who I think should be in the Hall of Fame, who should have been voted into the Hall of Fame today. Now, based on the rules of the Hall of Fame, I should say, the most any baseball writer can vote in is 10 players. 10 players on one ballot per year. So in keeping with that, I'm going to give you my ballot first, players who I think should be in the Hall of Fame. I start out with Greg Maddux, a no-brainer, and he was one of the people elected today, and he was elected with over 98% of the vote. No-brainer candidate. He should be in. He's on my ballot. Frank Thomas, again, he was elected to the Hall of Fame today. I believe he had about 82% of the vote, but it's enough to get in. You need 75%. He got 82%, so he's in. Again, no-brainer candidate, back-to-back MVP, one of the great hitters of all time, great right-handed hitters of all time. The Big Hurt, no-brainer. He's in. He's on my ballot. Tom Glavine, he's the third guy that actually got in today. He's the last one that got in. He got in with 91% of the vote. Greg Maddux, teammate, and even on my Mets for a few years, towards the end of his career, where he won his 300th game. Again, a no-brainer. He's in the Hall of Fame. He was voted in the Hall of Fame. He's on my ballot. Now, the rest of the guys didn't. The rest of my guys on my ballot did not get in. And we'll go through them one by one. Mike Piazza, who we'll get to more in a few minutes. Again, the greatest hitting catcher of all time, a no-brainer. He should be in the Hall of Fame. The greatest offensive catcher of all time. He's being kept out of the Hall of Fame, but seemingly at this point by suspicions that he used steroids or PEDs. He's never failed a test. He's never been on any list of anybody that failed a test. He's never admitted to taking steroids, at least not publicly. There's no record of it, only suspicion. He should be in. The same goes for Jeff Bagwell. Jeff Bagwell was not quite the hitter Frank Thomas was, but again, one of the great hitting first basemen of all time, one of the great hitters of his era. Again, kept out of it due to suspicion of using PEDs. No proof of it yet. There's no lists that he's on that we know of. There's been no leaks. There's been nothing on the Mitchell report that links him to steroids. He was a big, strong guy, muscular, but at this point, there's no links. He should be in. Curt Schilling. Curt Schilling, the greatest postseason pitcher of the modern era. His postseason numbers are insane. He won 2 championships. He has the greatest, listen to the stat here, and for his career, he has the greatest strikeout-to-walk ratio in the entire modern era of baseball. Since 1900. 1900. And we're in 2014 now. At 114 years of playing baseball, Curt Schilling has the greatest strikeout-to-walk ratio in that period, 114 years. A great pitcher, should be in the Hall of Fame. Craig Biggio. Bill James, the legendary Bill James, the godfather of Moneyball, of sabermetrics, ranks Craig Biggio as top 5 second baseman of all time. More than 3,000 hits. His WAR numbers for over a 7-year period, he was never under 4 wins above replacement per year. He had a year over 9 once. He's, again, a surefire Hall of Famer. And he also played catcher and outfield very well, too, in his career. Surefire Hall of Famer. He missed today by 2 votes. Next year he'll be in. It's an injustice, but he'll have to wait 1 more year. Tim Raines, I'll get to more in a second, too. A surefire Hall of Famer. He's stuck somewhere in purgatory. He's not gaining the votes at this point to get into the Hall of Fame. I'll explain to you in a few minutes why that's an injustice. He should be in. And lastly, Mike Mussina. Now, Mike Mussina, who spent half his career, 10 years of his career with Baltimore, and then the last 8 years with the Yankees. And given that he was a Yankee, I never liked him. And when he retired from baseball 5 years ago, I was skeptical of his Hall of Fame case. But I've been convinced of it. And I'm actually going to take a second here and get to his numbers. Because when you see his numbers, actually, he does make a good case. And the reason why he makes a good case, before as I pull it up, is that he pitched in the toughest division in baseball in the 90s and the aughts. The AL East during the steroid era was a hitter's paradise. It was the best hitting division in baseball. It was the toughest division in baseball. And pitching in that environment, Mike Mussina, and here's his numbers. His ERA plus, which is a stat that takes into account year by year park adjustment, league average, and does it year by year, and it makes all the adjustments. He was 60% better than. Let me rephrase that. He was at least 30% better than the league average, pitching in the toughest division in baseball. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times in his career out of 18 years. He pitched 18 years. Some of them were really 17 years, actually, because the first year he only started 12 games. But out of 17 years, he was at least... I'm sorry, 8 out of 17 years, he was at least 30% better than league average, pitching in the toughest division in baseball, in one of the 2 greatest hitting eras in baseball. And some of those years, he was even more than 30%. He was 40% twice. He was 60% once, or 50% once. That's a Hall of Fame pitcher in my book. Now, as far as the guys that actually got into the Hall of Fame today, that was, again, Greg Maddux, Frank Thomas, and Tom Glavine. I want to take a minute and acknowledge the greatness of Greg Maddux, who is absolutely one of the... You have to put him, as far as right-handed pitchers go, you probably got to put him in the top 3 or 5. And even pitchers overall in history of baseball, you can easily put him in the top 5. I'm going to borrow from Fangraph, Dave Cameron from Fangraphs. I'm going to borrow his information today to just a microcosm of how great Greg Maddux was. According to ERA minus, which is similar to ERA plus in that it adjusts for ballpark and it does league average year to year, it's a stat. Greg Maddux in 1994 and 1995, as far as preventing runs from scoring, run prevention, which is the pitcher's main duty, his 1995 season ranks 5th all-time in Major League history, in baseball history. And his 5th all-time in runs prevention. That's every single pitcher, every single year of baseball. Greg Maddux in 1995 had the 5th best year preventing runs of all time. And it wasn't even as good as he was in 94. In 1994, he was actually 3rd best. So think about that. In the whole history of baseball, every year, every pitcher, Greg Maddux has 2 years that place in the top 5 of all time as far as preventing runs from scoring, run prevention. An amazing stat. Here's one more for you. In 1994, again, one of those 2 years, the league, 1994 is considered the beginning of the steroids era. That's when home runs really started to jump. In fact, in that year, home runs jumped from .90 per 9 innings, which was in 93, to 94, it jumped to over 1. Almost a 10% jump in home runs from 1993 to 94. 10%. And in that year, Greg Maddux, and don't forget that was the strike shortened season too. Greg Maddux pitched, I'll get the exact number for you. He pitched, computer slow, I'm sorry, 202 innings. All right, 202 innings in a year where home runs jumped 10%. In the 202 innings that he pitched, do you know how many home runs he gave up? Over 202 innings in that season of burgeoning home run numbers? 4. 4 home runs in 202 innings of baseball in a year where home run numbers skyrocketed. And remember that stat I mentioned about ERA plus and how Mike Mussina, who I say should be a Hall of Famer, was 30% better than league average in 8 of his 17 seasons? In 1994, Greg Maddux threw an ERA plus of 271. League average is 100. And Greg Maddux, 271.
That's ridiculous.
That means he was 171% better than the league average. 171% better than the league average. He was more than twice as good as league average. And he did the same thing in 95. He was 260. 160% better than the league average. More than twice as good as the rest of the league. The average league he was in those years. And he led the league in that stat 5 times. He was 166 in 92. He was 87% better than the league in 98. And Mussina, as I say, I feel Mussina's a Hall of Famer, and he was over 30% better than the league average in ERA plus 8 times. Maddux was, 50% better, which is 20% better than 30%, 9 times. Again, one of the great pitchers of all time. Now, and also, I'm wearing these glasses in honor of Greg Maddux because he was the professor of pitching. And when he wasn't pitching, he wore glasses. So that's the reason why I'm wearing these glasses. It's new for me in episodes. Now, let's get to a couple of guys who did not get into the Hall of Fame. Let's start with Tim Raines. Tim Raines played in the 80s. His prime was in the 80s. Leadoff hitter for the Montreal Expos. And to appreciate his numbers, it's useful to compare him to another Hall of Famer, a first ballot Hall of Famer, and you know, someone who's considered a baseball icon, Tony Gwynn. Tony Gwynn was a first ballot Hall of Famer, as he should have been. Just to give you what Tim Raines, and it's mind-boggling that Tim Raines is not getting the support he deserves. Tony Gwynn's on-base percentage for his career was .388. On-base percentage across measures, base hits, walks, hit by pitch. It's the most important stat in baseball. So Tony Gwynn's on-base percentage was .388 for his career. Tim Raines, .385. Only 3 points different. Only 3 points below Gwynn. Now, his batting average, which is a more traditional stat that's been replaced by on-base percentage, Gwynn's batting average was .338, very high for his career. Raines was .294, which is, 40 points less, over 40 points less. 44 points less, to be honest. So how did Raines make up? How did Raines' on-base percentage become only 3 points off from Gwynn's on-base percentage, even though his batting average was 44 points lower? Getting on base, by how? By walking. A walk is as good as a hit. A walk is as good as a single. Tony Gwynn's hits for his career, 3,141. Raines is 2,605. But walks, Tony Gwynn, 790. Now here it is. Tim Raines, 1,330. Again, a walk is as good as a hit. He makes up. He practically evens Gwynn for his career. And another stat, offensive WAR, which measures offense, wins above replacement for offense. Tim Raines, 68.4, actually above Tony Gwynn in that important stat. Gwynn's at 66.3. Again, it's very close, but Gwynn and Raines are equal. Gwynn is a baseball icon, a first ballot Hall of Famer. He won in the first ballot. Raines can't get into the Hall of Fame. It's an injustice. that needs to be corrected. And it's amazing that more than a decade after Moneyball came out, when everyone gets on base, when on base percentage has been established as the best stat in baseball, that Raines cannot get into the Hall of Fame, and that his walk numbers are still unappreciated. But that wasn't all that Raines did. Besides getting on base, he was probably the greatest, perhaps, but you can make a good case for it, the best base runner of all time. Better than Rickey Henderson, who's generally credited with that. And do you know how? Rickey Henderson, and I'll get those numbers for you. Why not? Rickey Henderson stole more bases than Tim Raines. But when it comes to stealing bases, the number of bases stolen doesn't necessarily count. It's not the paramount number. It's the percentage of successful base steals that's the important number. It's the number of steals plus the percentage of successful steals that makes it count. The number of steals plus the percentage of successful steals. Those two numbers together are what's important. And Tim Raines, I don't even need the numbers. Tim Raines stole, his success rate was 10% better than Rickey Henderson's rate over the course of his career. And his numbers were not quite as high. The overall number of steals weren't as high, but the percentage was 10% higher. Raines is better. Belongs in the Hall of Fame. It's a great injustice that he's not in it. Now, let me close with a statement on the steroid era, so to speak. As I said earlier, there's guys who, Mike Piazza particularly, and Jeff Bagwell, who never tested positive for steroids. There's always been suspicion about it, but again, there's no at this point there's no proof that they took it. Any PEDs. It's unfair to keep them out of the Hall of Fame based on suspicion. Now, that's regarding Piazza and Bagwell. Now, the guys that we know took steroids, namely, let's go through them one by one. Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, Sammy Sosa, and Sosa also, don't forget, he got caught with a cork bat during batting practice too, which could taint him further. Mark McGwire, Rafael Palmeiro. One day we will mention Alex Rodriguez, but not yet. He's still playing. Now, as far as the steroid, it's a very difficult case to say that Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds are not going to be in the Hall of Fame at some point. They both bona fide Hall of Famers. Barry Bonds, I mean, you can easily make a case that Barry Bonds is one of the 3 greatest hitters of all time. I mean, easily, you can make that case. I mean, Babe Ruth, Ted Williams. I mean, you can put Barry Bonds right there. He has to be in the Hall of Fame, even though he took steroids. And I think a better way, and same with Roger Clemens, and I hate Roger Clemens, he does deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. He's won more Cy Young awards than any pitcher of all time. He had a long career. Again, steroids were a factor in that longevity, and with Bonds as well. But as far as the other guys go, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Rafael Palmeiro, and actually Rafael Palmeiro is not getting into the Hall of Fame by this method because today he received less than 5% of the vote, and that means at that point you're no longer on the writer's ballot. So Rafael Palmeiro is a long way from getting to the Hall of Fame at this point, anyway. But you can make a case that those 3 guys, even Manny Ramirez, if you want to include him in that, there's reason to believe that those guys are not Hall of Famers anyway. If you look at their numbers, particularly McGwire and Sosa, those guys, if you take the first half of their careers, time in their 20s, which is supposed to be a player's peak, they were not Hall of Famers at that point. Both of them took off in their 30s. And both of them had a number of years in his 30s where he was good. And so did McGwire. I mean, and certainly they put up great home run numbers, but they also played in the greatest era of home runs ever. And in that context, maybe hitting home runs for a few years in your 30s, even though you hit a great number of them, and Sosa hit over 60 home runs 3 times, a case could be made that you have to do more than that. And again, Sosa and McGwire, they weren't great defensive players. They were not great on base guys. Certainly they weren't fast. And I'll refer you to John Jaffe, the baseball writer. If you take their WAR numbers and you sort of add them all up and divide them and average out over the whole careers, under that method, they're actually below the average Hall of Famers. Mark McGwire played first base, also played the outfield. They're actually below, in terms of WAR, the average first baseman in the Hall of Fame, in Mark McGwire's case, and even in Sosa's case in the outfield, and also Palmero's case. So, as far as the steroid era, I think you can evaluate them on performance only. You can put Clemens in, and you can put Bonds in, maybe with some kind of asterisk, maybe with some kind of, notation that they used PEDs, proven PEDs. And the other guys, you can forget, you don't have to put, no matter how many home runs they hit, Sosa, McGwire, Palmero, Ramirez. In my opinion, they're not Hall of Famers anyway. So put Clemens and Bonds in. And I might add that there's probably a good case that there's some people in the Hall of Fame who took PEDs anyway. Something to keep in mind. So put Clemens and Bonds in. Evaluate the others on their own criteria, and you'll find that some of them don't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame anyway. So, to me, the steroid era could be evaluated like any other era. Let's get past it and move on. Thank you.
Let's go Piazza.
Yes, let's go Piazza.
Hi, I'm Leonel S.L. Ray, and I approve this message.